I talked to the wind developer about biomass. I asked him, since biomass is also an energy industry in Iowa, he mentioned that biomass is not as cost effective as wind. It's a loser of the carbon benefit. It takes more energy to create that energy, and that switchgrass is better for the environment and the food industry than corn. And there's been several articles that I've read to that effect as well. He said that solar is more expensive than wind, which is why there are more wind farms than solar farms on a U.S. energy map, which I verified. There happen to be maps on the wall that I'll speak on later. So I did ask the developer, when creating a hypothetical renewable energy system to complement an existing wind system, which type is best. In that article that I read about Germany, they did admit that wind energy is intermittent, that wind is not always available to feed into the power system. So normally there has to be an additional type of energy used with wind. So I asked the developer which type. I asked him wind plus solar. He answered that there are months where there is both insufficient wind and insufficient sun. In Iowa, that month is August. And then there's also difficulty with storing the energy from wind and sun, and then the expense of solar. So I asked, how about wind and then biomass? He said that biomass is storable, but it's still insufficient, and that wind, of course, is not storable. And so then we discussed wind and natural gas. Natural gas is storable, it's relatively clean, it's abundant, it's the most energy efficient. And so there's also existing infrastructure to support natural gas as well. So in his mind, wind plus natural gas is the best way to supplement the intermittent aspect of wind. So the main issue is storage. You cannot overfeed wind energy into the power system because it will cause instability. It's a safety hazard. And then, so sometimes there's too much, and then sometimes wind is not available, so there is an undersupply. And so there is a need to offset wind with another form of electricity, much in the same way a hybrid car draws from more than one energy source, which makes sense to me. We then discussed how to work with landowners for wind farms. He said one of the main questions is the type of compensation, whether you pay the farmer on the front end in one-time rental fee for 30 years, or whether you pay them on the back end and make them automatic investors. Regardless, the extra income is welcome on most farms. In fact, he speculates that wind farms may have played a crucial, but perhaps underrepresented or underappreciated, maybe underreported role in stabilizing the Iowa economy during this great recession that we have had, and to some people still having, at least the aftermath. According to the developer, approximately 20% of Iowa's energy use is generated by renewable energy sources. We discussed transmission as another major stumbling block to wind energy industry expansion. So we talked about storage, now transmission. I suggested to him a micro industry in the Midwest whereby wind energy feeds directly into our manufacturing. So the manufacturing would be the strongest, most lucrative customer of the wind energy that we generate. He responded that unfortunately that there is not sufficient manufacturing in Iowa to absorb the amount of energy generated by future wind farms. However, that if we did build a transmission line to Chicago, if we were able to do that, and then possibly Minneapolis and Omaha and St. Louis, and then other large cities that surround Iowa, and do this in the same way that North Dakota built transmission lines to Minneapolis for its hydroelectric and coal burning plants, The major cities surrounding Iowa wind farms would easily absorb wind energy generation. However, this would require multi-state cooperation, strong decision-making on policy, and then possible federal funding. So it would require a very strong governor, a governor with vision, determination, and then the capacity to work with various surrounding Midwestern governors to make this happen. Maybe we have that governor right now. I don't know, but it's nice to think about. I did ask him how Iowa made its gains in wind, and I did talk earlier about the Renewable Energy Standard that was passed in 1983. This is during Governor Terry Branstad's administration when he first became governor of Iowa. And that's what set us on the road to becoming a leader in renewable energy. The wind developer did respond to me that in the early days of wind energy, Top of Iowa was one of the first wind farms created in Iowa during that time, along with another wind farm created by Enron. It's true. So that was a great discussion that I had with him. And then we also looked at some maps that he had available to me. I looked at the North American Renewable Energy Map, the 2009 edition by Platts, which is a division of McGraw-Hill. It's copyrighted, so I cannot show the video, but I can talk about it. On that map, they talked about state renewable portfolio standards, which I mentioned about Iowa, renewable power plants, including water, wind, biomass, solar, and then geothermal. They also showed on the map the transmission lines, which I described from North Dakota to Minneapolis, and then wind power classification. What I saw from the map that Canada, the East Coast, the Atlantic seaboard in the United States were primarily wind and power plants. And then in the southeastern United States, there were a large amount of water plants. There's a high concentration of wind energy industry in the West Texas, in the Plains states. That's northern Illinois, northern Iowa, Minnesota, North and South Dakota. That map showed the transmission line that reached from North Dakota to Minneapolis, St. Paul, and the transmission line reaching from North Dakota to Duluth, which started my imagination going about such a transmission line reaching from Iowa to Chicago. It can be done. Will it be done? I don't know. But it can be done if we want it done. I want it done. I really hope other people want it done too. In Nevada and Wyoming, there are also wind plants. There's water plants in Colorado, the northwestern United States, Washington and Oregon. There's a high concentration of wind and water plants. In California, you see mostly geothermal in the central California area, and then also water and some wind and solar in Southern California. The map also includes a study of solar potential. Southern California, Nevada, Arizona, and New Mexico were considered excellent in terms of solar potential. Northern California, Texas, Colorado, Wyoming, Kansas, Nebraska, and Oklahoma were very good for solar potential. The northern states and the Midwest and the rest of the nation were good. Areas along the Canadian border were moderate. And that map also showed planned additional generation by year. There was also another map by Vertex. This is from 2008. Non-hydro renewable plants of 100 kilowatts or greater. The generation capacity, the primary fuel, wind, biomass, geothermal, solar, tidal, and then wind resources as well. So the northeastern corridors, according to that map, Maine, Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts, Maryland were primarily biomass, and then wind along the coast. Florida, east and the west coast of Florida, quite a few tidal existing and then proposed tidal plants, and then also some biomass.